You are listening to American Wag,
American Wag.
where the mind is respected
Why
and the
people
truth
care
is sometimes detected.
about each other. So, and what's the basis for this? I've been mulling things over. So I guess a little background is, I have been reading some classics, and Dostoevsky and Nietzsche. So
You had to go there. You
yeah,
had to go there.
I had to go there. I had to go there because I don't have enough things to do at work.
Right.
And when I come home, it hasn't been the season of Game of Thrones yet, so I have some spare
Isn't
time.
Game of Thrones done?
This is the last season.
Oh.
They're playing it out.
Got it. Okay, so, right, okay.
All right. And I also wanted to talk about superheroes. Exactly. Because when I first heard of Nietzsche,
Yeah, of course, that's what
everybody's
you...
saying the Ubermensch, and I'm
Right.
like, who wants to listen to this German spilling
I
that
know,
off?
I know.
And you get him confused with the Nazis and
But I don't think the Ubermensch, as I remember Nietzsche, and it's been a while, right, is a superhero, right? It's somebody who's sort of transcended more than somebody who is super powerful and super empowered.
Okay.
And and again, that's my recollection, and I'm sure you'll tell me I'm wrong, or someone else will tell me I'm
Well, I
wrong.
don't know. I mean, I said, first of all, I read, I'm almost done with Ecce Homo. I'm read The Antichrist first. And that was pretty good. And now I'm starting Zarathustra.
There's Zarathustra.
Yeah, that guy. The
Yeah.
one with the theme from 2000.
Yeah, right.
So I guess he was a Persian philosopher, a real
Yeah,
person?
yeah, real person.
Okay, all right, good.
Yeah.
So was he just not translated into German, or
I have
did
no clue.
Yeah,
I don't
okay.
know.
Okay, yeah. So when did you read Nietzsche?
I read Nietzsche in junior high school and high school.
Wow.
So basically, I went to this weird private school for a while, and they had the great books.
Mm.
Remember that whole, 4 shelves of the great books?
Right.
And me being me, sometime around, I don't know, 4th or 5th grade, I just started at the left and started working my way across. And 80% of the time, I had no fucking idea what I was looking at, right? I mean, I could read the words, but I didn't have enough life to have any idea of what was actually being said.
Nietzsche says something about that.
But a couple places, there were some doings along the way. And because I have my silly memory, I could pull shit up that I'd read.
Right.
And later on, it would be like, oh, that's what they were talking about with that shit. The one person I remember reading who made a lot of sense to me, even back then, was Aristotle.
Okay.
For some reason, Aristotle was really transparent, pellucid, just really clear. So yeah, I got to Nietzsche sometime a couple years later, because this was obviously a multi-year project.
Right.
And it speaks to the sort of adolescent a little bit in everybody, and it's...
I think so. I think that you should read Nietzsche right after you read Ayn Rand.
Yeah, probably. I think those two tie, and I think there's a thing that I wrote about a long time ago that I believe kind of very passionately, which is that one of the roots of the philosophical crisis we have today is the sort of romantic, philosophical world of 18th and 19th century Germany, of which I put Nietzsche in that camp. Other people don't. And I think the issue to me is the question of, romanticism is all about the will to action. It's about your being as opposed to the crushing kind of power of the world.
Okay.
And it's something that is the literal opposite of David Hume.
All right.
Right, who's all about hey, we're all just sort of peasants here together, right? Some of us have bigger houses, some of us have smaller houses, some of us starve to death, but we're all peasants and we're all part of this long unbroken chain of peasanthood. And we all kind of, and I'm being flippant about Hume and...
No, that's pretty good. I mean, you're better than the Monty Python.
Yeah, right, there's that.
David Hume could outconsume...
Yeah. Bruce, Australian philosophers. So for me, the deal is romanticism is all about sort of the adolescent question of who am I and what are the limits of my power.
Okay.
Right, and that's what being an adolescent's all about.
Does Byron's characters fit into that?
Come on. They're like dead in the middle. That's them.
It. Okay.
Right, and I'm going to do these grand, crazy things. I'm going to swim the Bosphorus.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to arm the Greeks and mount a rebellion. Right,
Okay.
I'm going to do these giant, futile, hopeless gestures. And
that's AOC.
well, actually, the thing that always comes to mind for me, there's a great movie, one of Michael Mann's first movies called Thief, with James Caan.
2.5 carat emerald cut diamond.
You know the movie.
I know it.
You know the movie, right? And it's the perfect epitome of this, because here's this guy, he's like a working thief, right? This is what he does. And the mob boss comes and is basically like, here's the deal, you work for me, right? You know, the house you have, I gave you, the wife I gave you, the kid I gave you, your life that you enjoy and want so much is yours because I gave it to you.
The burden of the rescued.
That's right. And Khan's response to all this is, fuck you, sends his wife and kid away, burns his house down, goes out and kills the mob boss and all his people, right, and walks away, right? And to me, that's like the ultimate Nietzschean kind of romantic self-actualization over everything.
Interesting. I like that. And the soundtrack was great too, Tangerine Dream.
Great movie. But the deal is that what that means is that what I'm burning down in doing that is any chance of having a life. Right? I'm burning down my ability to have a wife and a child. I'm burning down my ability to put my head down and do a job and add to the cultural and physical capital of the universe. Right? But in return, I get to do everything I want in this sort of tantrumy kind of way.
Interesting. So Nietzsche didn't have any kids.
Nope.
Ayn Rand didn't have any kids.
Nope. And I think that's...
And I'm thinking there's something about, what you said, there's this adolescent thing, and there's a kind of desire for this perfection. How do I motivate myself to become the best I can be without worshiping God? Or without even acknowledging the disciplines of religion?
Well, and part of what the point of the disciplines of religion are about, and again, not a religious guy, have been to church a decent amount, have read the Bible, 3-4 times, right? Old and New Testaments. Is basically know your place, right? You are part of this long chain of people, right, that are inherently imperfect and who basically suffer. And if you bear your suffering well, right, and you lead a good life, which again adds to the social and physical capital of your community, right, at the end of the day, right, you find redemption. Right. It's that humility, which is the opposite of the kind of the adolescent thing, right? That
has to pay off, and it doesn't.
I'll question that it doesn't pay off.
Yeah, it has to pay off because one of the things. Well, so in my reading Nietzsche, and after just finishing The Idiot, I find it. I'm gonna go there because that's what I do.
Yeah,
that's how I remember what I learned.
Yeah.
I just go there. And so right now, I am kind of primed to just like, why do I care about what people think? Beyond Feynman's jokey attitude.
Right.
But why do I even acknowledge that there is some moral authority in people who say, blessed are the meek?
Because, so let me give a flippant answer.
Go ahead.
Right? The flippant answer is, compare Portland, Oregon in 2019 to Salt Lake City in 2019.
Yeah.
Right?
Portland is probably vomit and dog shit on the streets.
Pretty much. Right? And I've mentioned this to you before that, not a religious guy. But if you look at religion as a meme, right, for creating culture, right, and I look at what are the cultures that are on foundational measures, not on philosophical measures, the healthiest, right? Mormons do pretty freaking well.
Well, that's discipline, but it could be discipline out of fear.
Well, it's discipline out of fear. It's a level of humility. It's submitting myself. I submit myself to, right, the community as a whole, to my participation in the community as a whole.
Yeah, but the community, it doesn't go beyond Dunbar's number, and so the question is, can you artificially build a community to which people should submit their will?
Well,
and I say you probably can't.
I don't think. Well, but So the answer is you come up with a mythos around why you do it.
All right.
Right? And if you look at the history, I had a friend who grew up in one of the communes here in LA. Right? And the commune in the 60s had an interesting history. They had some bank robbers, right?
Yeah. But see, you're applying scientific discipline now. But go ahead.
But no, there's a point, right? And so this commune is sort of working its way along, and they had a hidden advantage in that there was a very wealthy patron, right, who was a parent of a couple people in it. And I'm not going to get into more specifics, so I don't want to name names. And what wound up happening is Charles Manson comes along, and the commune pulled up the walls and was like autarkic, right? They lived within their community alone, and they had a whole mythos about this, about how society was against them.
Right.
And that mythos was a sustaining mythos, right? That kind of kept people aligned long enough to build the culture that let them become reasonably successful in the world, which they are today. Right? And they have their own interesting challenges and weird stuff, and I'm sure there's a movie or play in it.
I'm going to say that's just fealty to a mad king.
Yeah.
All right. So that's another form of feudalism, and feudalism is what's kind of hardwired into the human being.
Right. The stronger.
It's what we understand.
Yeah.
It's what we understand without having to study the law. We understand that big, strong guy over there. We understand that hourglass-shaped woman over there.
Yeah.
And they're our heroes. And we would do anything to get on their good side.
On their good side.
Out of fear and of love.
So here's...
And so the point, I think, of Nietzsche is he's asserting the primacy of that over anything else. And he does it without being... He doesn't say that he's carefree one way or another, but he has said, I've lived it this way, and I've lived it that way, and I'm beyond both of those. And this is the purest way.
So here's what I think is sort of the dilemma in what you're saying, right? And I want to think about this because I'm going to maybe walk this back when I say it. It's superficial and transient and doesn't persist. It falls apart right with the ring of a bell. And the dilemma is that it also doesn't give you a sense of, am I following a good king or a bad king? Right? Am I following somebody who's rapacious and bloodthirsty and evil? Is it Chainsaw Al in the business model? Right? Or is it Steve Jobs? Right? Who's an asshole, right? But who's a brilliantly creative asshole who's making something great.
Right.
Or is it, I'm trying to think of the archetypical beneficent boss. Ford had one for a while. I can't think of the guy's name. But he was like this super concerned, like knew the names of people. Or actually Lincoln Welding.
Willy Wonka.
No, but Lincoln Welding, right?
Okay.
Lincoln is like one of the companies that's always held up as like the beneficent leadership.
Okay.
Where, the leaders know everybody, they celebrate everybody gets shares, they're super productive in return, right? So that's a good king.
So how does that scale? I don't think that scales. I think you get to a nation about 50, 75, 80, 90 million, and then you have a society that's in place and it has a lot of inertia and it has a lot of momentum and it can keep going like a train even when it's run off the rails.
So
and then when it collapses, there's no escape.
So what you're almost also talking about, and this is another subject that's near and dear to me, is legitimacy.
Well, okay, but
right?
but also really, how responsible can the leadership be to the people? Everybody can't be this Lincoln guy, and it's impossible to do that as more than a senator.
But the flip side of this, right? So hang on. I think we're moving goalposts in our conversation. Let's go back. Let's go back to the ultimate the question before, which is, if I don't have religious faith, right? How do I create social capital? Right. This is a question I'm stuck on a lot. Because communities that they explicitly reject religious faith, right, seem to look to me like they're consuming their social capital faster than they're building it.
Okay.
Right, and again, I'll hold Portland up as a classic example, right?
Okay.
Portland is the city full of neat wannabe Ubermenschen, right, who basically are going to self-actualize their fucking brains out before they do anything else. And nobody has the kind of humility to submit. Now, the interesting thing that happens with this is those are the communities where Islam winds up getting footholds, if you look at Europe, right? And the whole essence of Islam, if you read what people write who have been Western, white, liberal men and women who convert to Islam, why do they do it, right? Because there's nothing else that they see in the Western world
Right.
that is worth submitting to, that brings the concept of a larger chain of being into their understanding.
Right.
Because we burned it all down.
All right, but this still doesn't. Why I think religion works, why I think religious discipline works, is because it's so damn simple. I mean, you can learn the whole thing before high school. You can learn everything you need
learn
to
it by
know.
the time you're 13.
Yeah.
Right.
You learn everything you need to know about a religion, and that's why it replicates itself so easily. Because you can half-ass it for a long time.
Well, but there's another thing about it, right? Which is, it's the story that keeps people tied together in a community, and it's the community that does the enforcing, and it does the things that we're talking about.
But if that is the model, then it doesn't matter if you're really tied to science or to reality. And because
well, sure, there have been all kinds of religions that have
but that's
built
it.
themselves.
That's it. I mean, I forget her name. She writes, Armstrong, I think is her name.
No.
Writes about religion, and she says the toughest thing about faith is what to do with the silence when you pray to God
and nobody answers.
and nobody answers.
That's what faith means. Faith,
Right.
faith means you believe it. If
Right.
God, basically, I gotta believe that if I took a knee and I prayed, and this voice came down, this big baritone sort of, I don't know, pick who should it be, right?
Right.
That came down and said, Mark, like, here's the deal, right?
I'm thinking about the
James Earl Jones was the person who came to mind, right?
Yeah, but I'm thinking about the woman who made sadomasochism. Oh, you've got to watch this.
Okay.
Oh, you've got to watch this
Okay.
film. I forget her name, but she made an animated
All right. I'll go look at
30-minute thing called sadomasochism, and God is her dad.
She's eaten in my aunt's house. But the deal is, if God was around, right, and we had direct experience of miracles, religion would be really fucking easy.
Yeah, well,
Right.
what did Ray Bradbury say about miracles or magic? Exactly. So we're stuck in this world where, if our iPhones don't work, it's a slow kind of collapse. And if you allow that there is a myth, if there's a myth, an origin myth that sustains a community, that animates their principles,
Yeah.
then that's how Stalin wins, because he can say any myth is substitutable for that. And the only reason that the Soviet Union didn't work is because
They didn't kill enough kulaks, obviously.
right, we didn't kill enough people, and
But the argument
our
is,
myth didn't sustain long enough. But obviously it's coming
so
back.
coming
back.
One of the things that happens is there's and this is something I read somewhere, and I can't remember who to credit for this, but the idea that basically all of humanity, we're simply a lab for myths,
Yes.
right? And some myths sustain, and some myths are like heroin, and they give you a real high for a while, and then you collapse and die.
Yep.
Right, and some myths don't sustain and die out quickly.
Yep.
And it's sort of American Gods is sort of
Okay.
the model.
All right. That makes sense to me.
Okay.
That makes sense to me.
So the question
Somebody
is-
just said humans are apes with brains that figured out math.
So the question becomes, if those myths are important, right? Nietzsche and the Romantics want to demolish myths, right? Their argument is that my will to power, my desire to self-actualize who I am inside, transcends the power of any myth. And so what I'm going to do is I gotta be me, right? Whatever me is. And so if I'm abandoning my wife and kids, if I'm walking away from my job, if I'm freeloading and letting other people do the work that sustains me, right? I'm being me, man.
But Nietzsche does so by saying he's a good king. Like, he really doesn't feel any animosity to people. He only argues against the Germans, and he argues against the rabbinical and the priestly society, because that's an obligation of somebody who sees clearly. And so he does it.
Is it?
He does it as a good king.
So is it an obligation?
And what he's actually trying to do is use a verb that they use in the Marine Corps, recalibrate.
Yeah, but
He's trying to recalibrate all the myths.
But I'll disagree, right? Because I think that at the root of it's like the classic joke about environmentalists who want to bring back rural society, right? They never picture themselves as the person cleaning out the stables. Mm-hmm. They're always the ones that owns the horses, right? That's the life that they envision, right? And when people have these sort of kingly and I will tell you, my kids had it when they were little, right? The fantasy of like, I am Wadib, right? They read Dune, right? And I am going to lead, right, the Fremen warriors across the universe, and I will be emperor of the world, right? It's the classic kind of child's myth to power.
True.
Right?
True.
And part of the whole thing is the idea of this limitless power over others is what they're looking for.
But I don't see that in Nietzsche. I don't see that he criticizes he criticizes Imperial Germany because he thinks the Germans are such sloppy thinkers.
Yeah.
But you don't hear him saying this is what the philosopher king should do.
Yeah, but he does believe that he could be the philosopher king.
But I don't think it is in that interpretation of a will to power.
You don't? Okay.
I don't think he wants.
Elaborate.
I think he wants to replace the priesthood with his own Zarathustra.
Right. So.
But I think he sees it within the people themselves.
So
if they would just stop paying attention to this madness, then they could come to a clearer realization of what is.
So here's the interesting crack that presents, right, around the time that Nietzsche's around, is when Enlightenment thinking, which basically held up the idea that I, as a peasant, am just as good as the guy living in the castle on the hill.
Okay.
Right? My rights are the same as his. His power may be different than mine.
Right.
But my rights are the same.
Yes.
And I have as much innate human dignity as he or she does.
That makes sense.
Which was radically different from the way people saw it before.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And Nietzsche kind of is taking that and running it to the edge of the table in its most extreme sense.
Well, that doesn't put him much further out than anyone else who talks about the numinous. I mean, if God is in you,
right?
If you have an immortal soul, then that's good enough. So what he's saying.
But I can't build a culture on that. I can't build a society on that. I can't feed 1 million people on that.
But there's music and there is culture. He as a critic of culture, he's just saying we have to stop pretending that there is morality in uplifting the dirty and saying that they're equal. You got to be clean, all right? And I think that's what he expects his message to do, is to clean out the cobwebs and actually rescue the Enlightenment and save it from itself, because it became something which is this kind of low, it doesn't distinguish between high and low. So you call it morality, but it's not.
Well, but see,
because it's actually a love of death. Because when you embrace the degenerate, in his words, then you're just saying, this life doesn't matter.
But the problem
everybody will be exalted later.
But look, there's two ways to look at the problem he's looking at. One is to say, okay, there's degenerate. There's all these people swilling gin in the village tavern and not working and knocking their women up and having babies and breeding and creating this Untermenschen as opposed to Übermenschen crowd.
Okay.
Right? And we need to clean them out. Right? And the other is to basically say, which is kind of the foundational Christian model, I'm going to reach my hand out to these people and I'm going to pull them up because in them is what's in me as well.
I guess I don't see that Nietzsche doesn't say that.
I think he said, and again, thin recollection on his part.
Right. That's where I have to go back.
Yeah, because what, for me, I think what he basically says is if people don't understand, if they don't understand, right, if they can't be brought to understanding, they're worthless.
Yes, as in they don't concern me. I have neither love nor hate for them.
So let them
But
starve.
it'd be too bad if they don't discipline themselves and figure it out. and I'm making everything clear, but you can't blame me if they don't take the medicine.
Yeah, but
I've invented the cure. Take the medicine or anti-vax yourself into death.
Yeah, but the dilemma with that is I don't know how you build an actual thriving culture on that.
I guess, and what Nietzsche doesn't sound like he wants to do is go capture an island and start from scratch. He just kind of assumes Europe.
Well, but it's also, more than he assumes Europe, I think, and again, interpretation from a long time ago.
Yeah.
Nietzsche always struck me as one of those guys in a coffee house who is totally wrapped up in his moral superiority, right, while living on dad's trust fund.
Yeah, the dad is not clear in Nietzsche's case.
Right, but you get my point, right?
Yeah.
It's that all I need is my own moral superiority. And that character in fiction throughout history, right, has never really been a winning character.
That's interesting. I mean, I sense, because I'm real fresh from this, that he says, hey, I know that Wagner has gone wrong. All right, and I grew up on Wagner. It's just like hip hop. Hip hop was great 20 years ago, but it has become shit.
Yeah.
And I have to stand up and say that.
Yeah.
And anybody who wants to defend the shit is kind of on an equal plane with me, and I'm happy to debate and make it clear
but what's missing,
that you are dealing.
But what's
in
missing
shit.
in all this, right? And I'll let's make music part of it, right? Music is one of the things that bonds communities, right? Why is music such a big part of religious ceremony in almost every culture?
Oh yeah.
Right? Because we have our songs.
Yes.
Right? Whether I'm, a Viking and we have our drinking songs, or whether I'm, a Catholic or a Protestant or a Jew, right?
Yeah.
We sing, right? If I'm a Muslim, I get sung to out of the tops of the towers.
Now I've already forgotten the words to De Yauna.
Right? Yeah. Let it go.
Oh.
And but the thing is, right, that what Nietzsche wants to say, I don't know, man. Nietzsche is arguing for this sort of intellectual razor, right?
Mm-hmm.
That sort of cleaves the good from the bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, from my point of view, the razor is what works and what doesn't work.
Well, I think Mencken gets him, and the interesting thing is, it was reading Mencken that got me into essays.
So Mencken is like the classic example, right? Smug asshole.
Yep.
Right? Shitty life.
Didn't know.
Didn't have a real impact on the world. Right? Like Mencken and Bierce are the people I look at as, like, their moral sense, absolutely clear. Do I kind of agree with them in a bunch of ways? Absolutely. But what's the logical endpoint of Mencken? There comes a point in every man's life where he wants to spit on his hands, hoist the black flag, and start cutting throats. Right?
Yeah. And I guess if Mencken was a sickly dude, Nietzsche was certainly sickly.
Yeah.
At the end of his days, and Thomas Paine was broke.
Yeah.
And on the edges.
Right. None of these people could sort of function in society.
Yeah. I think there are Sid and Nancy.
There's a great prologue that Nabokov wrote to Lolita. Right, and he writes it in the persona of John Jay, psychiatrist.
Okay.
Right, and he's talking about the hero Humbert, who has seduced this 12-year-old girl and then murdered.
Was she 12?
I think she was 12 in the book.
Holy shit.
Right, and then murdered this guy who became her lover later, or his rival for her love later on. Right, and so he's in jail. And he basically says, look, obviously this guy should have sought the help of a competent psychiatrist.
Yeah.
And none of this would have happened. Right? Conversely, we wouldn't have had this novel either. And so, there's this thing in which, Sid and Nancy weren't people I would want as friends.
Right.
I don't want them in my life.
Yeah.
Love the music.
Exactly.
And so that's the rub, right? And the rub is that when I've come to a point when I talk about life, that I look at, and I've told this story before, I did work on a charity that sent aid to Iraq and Afghanistan in '03. And one of the guys who helped us, because there was no FedEx to Baghdad at the time, right, was this Marine officer. And he was like an HR guy at Pendleton, and he placed commanders. So I was like, hey, I need to get something to Nasura, and he'd be like, call Bob, right? Here's his sat phone number, here's his email, he'll sort you out.
All right.
Right? And I'd call Bob, and Bob would go, okay, if you can have this here on this date, we have a supply convoy coming, we'll pick it up, we'll bring it in, and we'll distribute it. And I'm like, awesome.
Bam.
Right? And one day I'm talking to this guy, and I go, dude, can I buy you lunch? Like, you're an amazing person, I'd love to just meet you. And he goes, sure, come on down to Pendleton. So I drive down to Pendleton, I meet this guy. And when I see him, it's clear that he has like something going on physically. Like I can't read it, right? And we sit down quickly, and he explains he has Parkinson's. And his backstory is he was a instructor at Top Gun, right? So he's a super top level fighter jock, right? He's got a weekend gig as a pilot instructor for FedEx, making another $100,000 a year on top of his fighter pilot salary. Right, he's got the gorgeous blonde wife and the baby girl, and got the world completely tied by the ass. And he comes down with Parkinson's, and his life falls apart.
Yeah.
Right, every aspect of it.
Yeah.
And we finish our conversation, and I'm talking to him, and I go, dude, forgive me, because like I don't know you very well, but I have to ask, like, how do you maintain this composure and this attitude and this like engagement with the world in the face of everything you've gone through?
Yeah.
And he starts laughing, and he goes, I'm super religious. Right, I've been religious since I was 12 years old. You know, this is the path God has put me on. And, you know, I wish it wasn't. I got other paths that I would have liked a lot better than this path. Right, but these are the cards I'm dealt, and I'm going to play them. And so, I look at that as this amazing survival characteristic. Right? Because when I look at people who don't have that kind of belief structure in some way, shape, or form, who lose everything, right? Where do they go? I'm going to commit suicide. I'm going to get on top of a building with a rifle. I'm going to just drink myself, you know, until I die in some alley someplace. There's no the resilience that you have to have in the face of a basically indifferent and sometimes hostile world isn't there.
It's interesting, and what I say is this guy is in touch with his myths.
Yeah,
he's in touch with his archetypes, and he knows the kind of person he's supposed to be.
Right.
And there are certain things, and that has to do with a discipline. But I'm going to say that that's psychological discipline. I'm going to say.
I don't think it's psychological. I think it's spiritual, not psychological.
But the spiritual is psychological without the scientific details. And I don't see, for example, and I guess I'm perhaps giving too much weight to Jordan Peterson, but I don't see how you can maintain a psychological clarity without doing that in a disciplined fashion. So you have to grow this habit of, am I really making sense? Am I really doing things that make sense according to the big plan?
But the issue is the beauty of culture and religion, because to me I'll broaden this to culture and take it away from purely being religious woo-woo God.
Okay, all right.
Right? Is that they ground you in what that big plan is. Right? I'm given a plan.
Right.
There's a cost to me of not complying with the plan.
Yes.
There are benefits to me if I do succeed within the content of the plan. Right?
Sorry, my mind goes straight to come on, who am I thinking about? Who's in your wallet? Samuel L. Jackson.
Oh, right.
Django Unchained.
Yeah.
So his plan was made until Django shows up. He's like, what's this nigga doing on a horse?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. My world just got changed. And so it's one of these things where the question that's interesting is, can an individual person do this by themselves?
Yes.
I'll argue
an extraordinary person.
Yes.
A person who makes peace with their alienation from society.
But the key is, if you're alienated from society, right, you're a hermit. You live off by yourself in a cave.
I'm not saying that.
I can have a clean cave, or I can have a dirty cave, right? But I'm in a cave someplace.
No, you're in a 1968 VW bus that's painted yellow and purple. And you just say, only me and my friends understand me, and the rest of society is kind of kooky, and I'm special, and it's kind of like Ender's Game. Ender and his sister are these miraculous kids, and they end up ruling the universe.
One of the perfect romantic novels, I'll point out,
Right.
capital R romantic.
But again, they are beyond their parents. They're beyond their schooling.
But
They're beyond everything.
But this is the whole point, right? That what all this is about is this fundamental teenage belief that I'm different, right? That I'm beyond everything.
Yes.
Guess what?
And that, I think, is a psychological fact.
Guess what? You're not.
I think
You're not
it's
different.
Yes, exactly. But you have to believe that you are luckier than everybody else, or else, if you face the reality of how pointless much of everything is, you would implode.
Not if you have religion. Not if you're.
But if
I'm betting Mormons don't implode like that very often.
no, but they don't have to. I mean, they stay away from Nietzsche.
Yeah, and does that imply that Nietzsche is a good thing or a bad thing?
No, it implies that the human mind is that pliable, so that if you get the wrong thing in there, you can invert your whole world.
So the key element being what? So what's the right thing, right? The answer is, to me,
is to accept. I'm gonna live in this box, and this is what I say when I get into arguments about meritocracy.
Yeah.
Some people argue, oh, this is not a meritocracy. I say, yeah, it is a meritocracy. You just can't afford to compete in the real meritocracy.
Yeah.
And what you want is a league. You don't want to play basketball against LeBron.
That's right.
You don't want to have a dance contest against.
Have you ever seen the Asian kids leagues in San Francisco? And there's one, I think, here in the South Bay. They have Asian kids basketball. Right. And literally, if you're not an Asian kid, you can't play. And why is that? Because the median height for the high school kids is like 5'7".
Yeah.
Right. And there's some tall Asian kids out there, but they're rarer.
Yeah.
And
we have to get leagues, and that's one thing I'd say that our democracy has to do, is get leagues and allow people to compete at their level and be satisfied with that.
Well, part of this is the whole bowling alone argument.
Well, no, I'm taking it over to transgender.
But I'm not even. But
women.
I'm not going there. What I'm talking about is it's not sports per se, although you can talk about it in the context of bowling. But it's in the context of, I'm now a member of my local Elks or Lions club.
Yeah.
I'm a member of the Chamber of Commerce. I'm a member of all these little local associations. And you know what? At that level of the game, I'm pretty damn good at it.
Yep.
And I get respect for what I do when I show up every day.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Whereas if I went up to the state level, right? Like when I was an athlete a long time ago, right? And I was a pretty good regional and state athlete. And then I get up to the national level, and it's like I go from here to here. And it's like, yeah, guess what? You suck.
What sport was that?
Cycling.
Okay.
And
I had the unfortunate of being a diver in California.
yeah, bummer for you.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah. And but the thing is that what you look at is we don't have all these little intermediate structures that we participate in, right? We've washed all that shit away.
I mean, that's a bad thing. I don't disagree with that. And I think what's going on is a kind of destruction about the middle class myth in the United States.
Again, we're far afield. Let's stay on topic.
We are. Okay. All right. So yeah, we're bowling alone. We don't have our leagues. And no, you shouldn't have gone to the bowling alone.
Why?
Because people aren't looking to bowl alone. They're not looking to be Nietzsche. They're not looking to throw away society and say it's all about me.
But what they aren't looking to do, right, is we don't have the idea of subsuming ourselves to something greater than ourselves. Right?
And
What's this?
We've consumed too much alt.
What's this, like half a percent of the people in the country go in the military or something like that? Some ridiculously small number.
Yeah.
Right? Which is where you learn that, I don't really fucking matter. What matters is my team. And my team doesn't really matter. What matters is the core or whatever you're part of.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right? We don't have any of that anymore. And
we do. It's politics, and everybody talks politics.
yeah, but
Except local politics doesn't work. It's being subsumed to national politics.
right, national politics doesn't work either because it's basically a team sport. And what happens is we have a couple of super powerful oligarchic teams
Yes.
that are competing, and each of them is sort of reaching down and saying, "We're on your side, people."
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right?
And-
But again, the Nietzschean question to me is, what do you do about burning down your association with others. Right? Nietzsche says, I'll be associated with you if you think right.
Well, Nietzsche wants to be transcendent. So the question is, how many transcendent individuals can we stand?
What's the fucking point of being transcendent?
To see what other people don't see.
And then what?
To point it out.
And then what?
You get a stadium full of people and you sing.
Yeah, okay, and how many, it's the, how many stadium-filling singers are there in any given culture?
There only has to be a few.
That's right. And so the problem is, all of us, and I'll go back to the LeBron thing, right? All of us are the high school kids convinced that we're going to be LeBron because we can play in the park.
Right.
And we're burning down the entire rest of our lives for basically a jerk-off fantasy of being the singer in the stadium.
But people don't go and turn to have religious conversions because of that until they hit bottom.
Maybe it'd be better if we didn't make them hit bottom first.
But how would they know?
Because they would kind of follow the lead of the people that brought me. Part of the deal is, I had this interesting aha moment years and years ago. I was on a bicycle trip through Death Valley, riding around. It's winter, fortunately. And there's this place where the wagon tracks intersect the road, right, from the original parties that came across Death Valley.
Yep.
And a bunch of us put on some sneakers, like left our bikes in the car, and hiked about 4 miles down and 4 miles back on these wagon tracks.
Okay.
Right? And every half mile there was a cairn. Right? Somebody died.
Yep.
And to me, that sort of, I sort of had this giant Zen aha moment of, that's human society, right? Society's this wagon train headed someplace. We're not completely sure where.
Yeah.
Right? Some of us make it all the way to California. Right? Some of us make it all the way to California and die in Death Valley. Right? And along the way, the only thing that matters is the wagon train moving forward.
Well, can you just take that for granted?
Can you?
I think that's what people do.
Because I think that I think about the people doing that, and after you buried your 5th or 6th kid along the way, right? Isn't there a point where you just go, fuck it, just stop here and let us all die? And what kept them moving? Right? And when I look at Nietzsche, right, or when I look at, Portland, right, and I look at the people who are all about their self-actualization and kind of like, being the best of themselves that they could be, I'm 100% convinced those people would have stopped and died.
Well, yeah, I think ultimately that's the kind of thing that a person has to face, which is how hard they're going to try before they die.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced that enough of those people are born that keep society moving forward.
Yeah, but
and they do transcend. And you can't tell them shit.
They don't transcend in a kind of Nietzschean spiritual intellectual way. They're not sitting here in a stadium pontificating to the rest of the world.
Well, yeah,
they're herding the oxen and pushing the oxen forward and getting people off their fucking asses into the wagons.
Right. But then they get to the West Coast and then they send their kids to Berkeley.
Right.
And then there's Berkeley professors. And Nietzsche is looking down at the world of Berkeley professors. And he's saying, I don't need this tenure. I've transcended the Berkeley professorship. And that's the kind of place where he is.
So you have to have read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
I haven't, and I suppose I'll have to.
Yeah, you have to. I've got a copy of it somewhere on the shelf. I'll find it for you.
But that's falling in love with your shovel, right?
No, because this guy basically, what this guy does is he's a philosophy grad student, and he's working on this transcendent set of problems, and he loses his mind and has a full-on breakdown.
Okay.
And he's just sitting in his living room on the floor. Right, and he basically is sitting there, and his wife is yelling at him, and his kids are yelling at him, and he doesn't need to get up. Right, there's no point in getting up because he's transcended all this.
Right.
Right, and at the point where he pisses himself, his wife calls for help. Right, and they put him away, and he goes through electroshock. Right, and that's the end of that first chapter of this guy's life.
Okay.
Right, and the problem is that's what transcendent looks like in reality. It looks like some dumb asshole sitting on the floor with his kids screaming, Dad, what's wrong with you? Well, Dad pisses himself because his brain is off in some transcendent alternate reality.
That's hilarious.
And that's why I'm a big human fan, right? Because fundamentally to me, what matters is how do we engage in the world, and how do we engage with each other, and how do we build a future for those who are coming that's better than what we had?
See, that's romantic. Why does the future have to be better? It doesn't. And I think that is the kind of thing which is, again, raising up the meek. And it's baked into...
I don't think that's wrong. I don't think that's at all. I think that's the opposite of romantic.
It's baked into our society that things have to be better. The cost of living has to stay stable, and the kids have to have a better place than we do.
But the measure's different, right? That you want to raise better kids than you are. You want your kids to be better parents than you are. You want your kids to be more successful and happier than you were.
And that's just love. And people always will have that for their own kids.
Right.
It's baked in. You don't have to think about that. It's really weird when I hear people talk about, there's bench ads about be a dad today.
Yeah, I know. I can't imagine not.
I'm
right.
like, wow. Right.
But the flip side is, I know people, right? And remember, I grew up in the epicenter of hippiehood. Right. I know people who didn't do that. I know people.
They're defective people.
But they're transcendent because they were like off on their trippy, Zen Buddhist. I can't be a parent. I have to go to my Buddhist retreat this week.
Right.
And you'll find your own way, sunshine and redwood, my little children, right? Dad is going to go seek enlightenment. You're laughing.
Oh, you're killing me, redwood.
Thank you for listening to American Way. Join us again, won't you?